In the true reality, everybody is free. Back to work. What? Stupid. Back to work. My, oh my, oh my. I mean, a lot of people have been just working this whole time. I mean, it's back to work for me, you know, but yeah, there's been people who, like, I have friends who never skipped a beat, you know. They've been working this whole time, and to them it must have been strange seeing us all like have like like manic attack for for the past 3 months, you know. It must have been strange, you know. They're going to work every day, everything's just same as it's always been, and you know, they go online for 1 minute and it's like they're like, oh my, what's happening with everyone? You know, they're just going and stopping and getting fucking, you know, a little bag of chips or something before they get to work, you know, and then you know, they might bring in a egg salad sandwich their wife made for them. They're just, you know, sitting there eating, and they look up and like a guy throws a flaming garbage can right through the storefront window. Power to the people! They're like, oh my lord, what's happening? You know, and like it must be strange for them because, you know, we're going back to work now. Fucking these fucking headphones are fuck with me. You know, we're going back to work now, but they've been working this whole time, you know. So, back to work for me, you know. Tonight I'm going back to work and doing doors at a comedy club, you know. And it's gonna be fun, you know. And I was thinking about it. It's like you get the $2,000 CERB check, right? And right before, you know, I got on CERB. I was just making $2,000 a month, and in order to make $2,000 a month, well, I was working 12 hours a day at this security job, which I'll elaborate more on later in the podcast. But yeah, I was having to work 12-hour shifts 7 days in a row, and then I'd have 2 or 3 days off, and then I'd work for 7 days in a row, and then I'd have 5 days off, and on those 3 days and 5 days, well, I would go do other work at other places. So I was working almost like 12, because some days even on a 12-hour shift, I would work somewhere else, and I would work 18 hours in a day, all to make roughly $2,000 after taxes. You know, it was like starving, choosing whether you want to pay your electricity bill or do you want to eat food. You know, that's what it was like for me for since I left home at like 15. Maybe in 16 or whatever that is, 17 years, I've had maybe 1 or 2 years of the consistent work where I was making good enough money that I could pay the bills and eat and stuff. And, you know, it's wild because going back to work, it's like going back. It's like we got a little fucking vacation from like this, like being a slave. You know, it's like we're all kind of slaves. That's what I've heard people say. You know, this is a conspiracy podcast. You know, I've heard people say that, you know, our SIN number is just our slave number. Is that true? I don't know, is it? But could be. So, yeah, you know, I've had a lot of jobs in my life. I've really never worked anywhere for more than 1 year. Well, I worked at a security company for several years, but each year I would switch to a different site. Yeah, I'm always jumping around from job to job, you know. And when we were younger, people would say that no, you should stick with one job and stay at it for, you know, 5 years or 10 years, you know, just have the experience. But me, I was always a temporary guy. You know, actually, my first, one of my first jobs was working at a temporary work agency. I think it was called Labor Corp. It was when I first moved to Ottawa from Kemptville. Prior to coming to Ottawa, I worked at a landscaping company when I was 15, maybe for 3 days, but I got fired, so I don't count that. My first kind of real job was working at this labor agency, and it was in the apartment complex that I lived in, underneath labor tech, labor ready, something like this. And so every morning we would go down there at around 6 in the morning, 5:30, and we'd sit there till about 8, and we would wait for jobs to come in. There was all sorts of work, anything where they needed a laborer. Say construction site cleanup. There's construction site cleanup. In the winter, we would remove ice from construction sites. We would help garbage trucks if they're down a guy, or if they had a big amount of pickup to do that day. We stood on the side of the road when with one of those signs occasionally, though you needed a special course for that. And there was a little course, and there's a couple of people at this labor agency that had expertise, and there's actually more higher level labor agencies that deal with people who are like truck drivers or who have an actual trade. But this was more like just handyman labor. So I restorated chimneys, and I did all kinds of stuff. What else did I do? Yeah. So I finally found my job. I ended up working at this moving company, and that's when it clicked. That was when I realized that was a job I wanted to do. After trying out a bunch of different labor jobs. I wouldn't necessarily recommend for a young person to work at a labor agency because it's pretty cutthroat, and you're working with a lot of people who have addiction and mental health problems. But if you're tough, it's a good place to start off because you get a lot of experience. You get to try out various trades. You know what I mean? Like I worked with a plumber, I worked with an electrician, and I didn't really like any of that. I sort of came into my own when I started doing moving. And moving was it was great. It was like being a cowboy. I loved it. It's definitely my glory days. So I worked with maybe 4 or 5 big moving companies while I was at the labor agency, and then I got this job at a moving company called Trinity Moving, and it was actually a Christian moving company, which was hilarious. That was kind of like a ploy or a scheme by the owners, these fellas from St. Lucia, I believe, and they took me in like I was their kid. It was amazing. There were all these giant muscle guys, and then me. Well, guess what? I think it was 17 or 18 when I got the job there, and within a week or two, they made me a supervisor. Yeah. Because, I was one of the only well-spoken people there that wasn't a criminal. And it was a great job, though. It was close to where I was staying, so I would bike there in the morning. And, in the first year I won an award. I got a raise. I got like letter of recommendation, and by the next year I was like the top supervisor at this moving company. We specialize in pianos, so I don't really have a back left anymore, but so I was, I would move pianos, I would move fridges, big stoves, anything in any house. Sometimes we do 2 or 3 moves in a day. Sometimes we work for 20 hours. We drive to Toronto and back. It was like getting paid to work out while traveling and getting to meet all these new people. And if my body was indestructible, I'd still be doing it today. It was my favorite job. You carry the boxes behind your back. You work with those interesting characters. Ex-bikers, ex-cons, the occasional guy who works at a real serious job who's just down on his luck and needs to work. There's always people coming and going, and I would get to train them. I took all these safety courses, so I would train people in how to lift things safely. And like I said, if it was safe on the back, I'd still be working there. I love moving. I even contemplated working in a moving company this summer again, but I didn't want to rush back into it because I didn't know what was happening in the world. I didn't know if I was going to get stabbed to death by a juggalo on the bus. Yeah, and then after being a mover, I got this job at a hunting and fishing lodge up in northern Quebec. And that was an interesting job because it was my grandfather was the manager, and my uncle was, the acting manager. Like my grandfather would do more of the paperwork and stuff like that, and my uncle was the guy who would run the things like on the ground. And my mom worked there, and like my whole family did. So my job was to caretake this hunting and fishing lodge for the winter. So I went up north, and they trained me on how to caretake the hunting and fishing lodge, and it was a wild job, let me tell you. Oh my lord, because I was up there by myself. It was actually when I got my dog Jackson, and I was up there for about 6 months. And it was just like, when you're a young man, when you're 18, 19, you think, I don't need anyone. I don't need society. I'm going into the bush. I don't need a damn thing. I just need my knife, my weed, and my will. After that job, I came crawling back to society. Please, someone talk to me. It was a crazy job that we had like all of our food for the fucking winter in this big freezer. It was wild, and like one point I got lost in the bush, and I couldn't find the path, and I was panicking, and I almost froze to death. It was wild, and when I came out of the bush, I was never quite the same again. After getting lost. And actually, after the job had finished, there was wild points of it, like I had to go get these big propane tanks because I'd run out of propane in my cabin, and the only way to get away from the cabin that I was at during the winter was to go over the ice on a snowmobile or go through the bush around this mountain. So I went out and had to get these 10 freaking propane tanks, and I had to bring them, bring them back because I was running on propane, and then someone could have drove by and stole them. So in the course of a day, over 12 hours from sun up to sundown, I snowmobile across the lake, through the bush. It was about a 40-minute snowmobile ride. Get 2 or 3 of them, put them on my trailer, and go back. But here's the thing. On my way back, if I were to go too fast or if I would go around a corner too quickly, one of them would fly off. Oh, yeah. So one would fly off and go into the snow, and then when you go to go get it, the snow would be about 8 feet deep, and you would sink into the snow. At one point, I got my snowmobile actually into the fucking snow, and I was stuck. And it was fucked. I had to dig the snowmobile out. I had to take the trailer off. But that's not the worst part, because when I finally got back to the lake, I was going across the lake, and bing, one of the fucking propane tanks popped off the back of the trailer. Yeah, right off the back of the trailer, and it friggin' it flew over. And the thing is, at this point, it was, I don't know, the end of February or something like that, and there was big holes in the ice where you could see the lake. Yeah, big holes in the ice. I think it was actually water rising up on top of the ice, but it looked like big gaping holes. But as long as I stayed on my path, the snowmobile path that I rode over all winter that was thick, I was safe. But the propane tank, it flew off and it rolled ahead. I had to crawl out of my belly towards the open hole and grab the propane tank and pull it back in. It was a wild place working up there. But I got to train my dog, and it was a beautiful place. I made a folk album while I lived up there. I just play my folk guitar and I track record album. It was great. I wish I could have done it as a more mature man, because I was, as a young man, you don't get it. And when I got back, I had such hardcore social anxiety for about 2 years. I could hardly talk to more than one person at a time. It was wild. And I saved up a lot of money, but I moved to Montreal, and I lost it all. And that's when I moved back to Ottawa, started over again. This time I got a moving job at a bigger company. I think it was called Fred Guy. It was a bigger, more serious company, but with my experience as a supervisor working at the other moving company, I was more than a shoo-in, and they put me with this guy. Everyone called him Homer Simpson. He was a wild fella, you know, because he would just bend right over. You're supposed to lift your legs. He would bend right over and grab boxes and be like, "Ah!" And you know, you know, and he'd always be smoking these little joints while he was driving, and they pull up to the customer's house, each little fucking joint in his mouth. Like, we smoke joints always. Like, we were always smoking dope while we're moving, but we wouldn't have it right in our mouth. You know, like, my lord, my lord, my lord. You know, it's like, yeah, you can't do that. And I lasted with him for about 2 weeks. And I had to go into the office because this guy was so wild. He would lift with his back, and he had all these crazy stories. He was constantly fighting with his wife on the phone. He was constantly saying weird things to the customers. He was a strange fella, you know, and I had to go talk to the boss. I was like, look, I tried working with this guy, but I have to find someone else to work. You have to find me someone else, okay? They're like, they all started laughing. They're like, wow, no one usually lasts more than 3 days with Homer. Apparently, they'd made bets on how long I'd last with them, and I was probably one of the longest people to ever last with them. That labor jobs. They're wild, man. Yeah, they're fucking wild. Woo! You know, we did some fucking crazy things moving. Smoking joints. And at that big company, it was the first time I saw a mover drinking on the job. It was like we'd all have a beer occasionally if a customer gave us to us, but this guy would have fucking 2-4 underneath his fucking 18-wheel, and he'd drink the whole thing while you were bringing him boxes all day. Man. You know, and so I worked there for a while, and then I switched over to this other company. It was called David's, and it was a family-owned company, and the people who worked there and the owners who worked there were bikers, you know, and some of them knew some of the bikers in my family, and it was interesting because I looked like the people I'm related to that are bikers, and it was so interesting, you know, to interface with these people that were the kids of the people that my family knew, you know. And this moving company was again smoking dope and weed constantly, and you know, I worked with a bunch of array of interesting characters. This old hippie used to be an old acid mushroom head. I worked with this guy who was like a pirate, and he would say all these sexually lewd things to women customers. It was like wild, and he'd fallen down drunk so many times if he bumped into something, he'd be like, ah! Everything he ran into, because he was just an old drunk that fallen down so many times he was all chipped to fucking shit, you know. And it was a crazy place. I think one of the last times I worked there, there was this tornado up in, I think, Constance Bay or someplace near Ottawa, Ontario, and we went up there, and the roads were completely covered with trees for about 10 or 20 kilometers, and we worked directly with the police with chainsaws and everything, just clearing these roads, like 5 movers and like 10 cops, just clearing the roads to get to these houses. And we were there for we'd worked for maybe 7 or 8 hours that day, and then we were there for another 12 hours. You know, it was wild. And then when we got there, the guy who actually started the moving company originally, David, or I think it's David, I can't remember. Anyway, so he was there, and he was crying because they'd put this new support beam into their cottage or their house, and in this tornado it had blown over a tree, and the tree landed on the house, but the support beam saved them. The support beam, if it wasn't for the support beam, the big giant tree would have just smashed the house to pieces, you know. And so we got there, and yeah, it was wild, you know. These things would happen all the time when you do labor jobs and stuff like that, because you become close with them, you know. And then you go help them do something else, or someone gives you a side job. Always in moving, I'd be getting side jobs either from customers or people I worked with. Oh, you want to help me with this little other thing on the side, or you know. And in between each job, I'd be doing other things like doing like handyman work, or doing any labor job I could get my hands on in between. You know, whenever I'd have times off. Like there's points when I'd be working as a mover, and then I would go stock shelves overnight. And I did that for a month or two. And always working just to survive and just to have the dope to work. because you need the dope and you need to go to the bars and you need to party, to survive. And that's the thing. What's so crazy about it is the points when I had the most money while I was working, I would spend the most money, sort of easing the fucking the pain of forcing myself through it. When I had the most money in my life is when I fucking did the least with my life. And on the points of my life when there's dips and I'm not working a lot, that's when I get the most done, over the past 6 months. And then after being a mover, I started repossessing houses. And that was a very interesting job because it's not what you think. We weren't repossessing houses from poor people. It was mostly people living beyond their means. Or grow ops or drug houses or weird things. Like we repossessed this murderer's house who killed his wife and threw her in the back of a Walmart parking lot. And his house was full of guns and weapons and stuff. And, that was our job. Our job was repossessing. So we'd go through everything in this guy's house. And it was crazy. There was, we'd find guns. We'd find big grow sets for growing weed and stuff like that. We'd find everything. And our job was essentially breaking into people's houses. My job was basically rolling joints and breaking into folks' houses. And it's kind of a scummy job. It's kind of like being a fucking meter maid or something like that. But again, it wasn't like little old ladies or poor people. It was people with problems living beyond their means. We repossessed this one hoarder's house, and it took us 3 months and 15 to 20 fucking full dump bins just to empty out this hoarder's house. And it was it was like you'd shovel and fill garbage cans, and you'd go dump them out, and you'd look down and nothing would happen. It was like fighting the tide. No matter what you do, you couldn't empty out the house, and it was back then I was still doing drugs and shit, so I'd do we do some fucking boom, boom, a couple of and then we just fucking get right through the work, and it was those were the days. Those were the glory days, when you didn't have your health to think about, your mental, your physical, your spiritual. And plus, I don't do drugs anyways, because when you think of where drugs come from, it's kind of a bad place. That's the same place that child porn comes from, and the same place that human trafficking. It's that's where hard drugs come from. So it's I don't do those anymore, but I didn't know that back then. So we would do a bunch of hard drugs and work our fucking asses off, and it was interesting. But I'd hit walls, you'd hit walls because you can't party. There's times when I was working at the moving company, and I'd fucking party for fucking till 4 or 5 in the morning. Then I would just go to the moving company and I'd sleep in one of the moving trucks, and they'd call me, "Where are you, bud? Are you late for work?" And I go, "No, you are. I'm reading the truck." You know what I mean? It's so yeah, the repossessing houses, we found all kinds of stuff. It was I get so much just stuff people leave behind, and it was good stuff, My buddy who owned the company, he would sell stuff. He'd make a secondary, living he had his own thrift store off of shit that people didn't like. It's reselling shit, but sometimes you find good stuff, real interesting stuff, cowboy boots, things you like, interesting things, because we're working out of the country. We'd repossess, say, bikers' houses and stuff like that sometimes. So there'd be some fucking wild shit, and we were driving around just going, woo, at people out the windows. Because that's what you did when you were a laborer. Yeah, you drive by and you'd be like, "How you doing there, ma'am?" That was what it was. I don't do that anymore. And after being a house repo labor guy, maintenance, we'd cut lawns, we'd do all kinds of stuff doing that. And after that, I decided I was going to be a famous singer-songwriter. So I went on welfare for about a year or two, and just was I'm going to be on welfare, and I'm going to get famous. I'm going to get famous with, as Norm Macdonald might say, tyranny of sheer will. But the problem is, when you stay on welfare, you get fucking... being on welfare, whoa. You go crazy. So, you know what I mean? And it's just I didn't get anywhere. You don't get anything done. Yeah, like Charles Bukowski says, you don't get anything done. It's when you're starving. You get everything done on a full belly. You need a steak and a nice glass of beer to get things done. So trying to go on welfare and then just make the perfectest art. It's like no, it's not the perfectest art. There's no such thing as that. It's a multifaceted, like almost business to get successful in anything entertainment wise. And I didn't realize that at the time, but I learned that you just can't blow up. You just can't fucking fame fall into your lap, because you gotta actually go out into the world and do something about it. Do something. You can't. So. After welfare, that's when I became a security guard. Yeah, because my back was shot, my senses were shot, my nerves were shot. I was just lying there on the ground fighting with my ex. Yeah, baby, yeah. And yeah. I'm going to get into that in another episode, because being the security guard, I got more stories than I can fit onto a video. I'll run out of friggin' breath before I can tell them. So I might need to do a 2 or 3 or 17 part series on when I was a security guard. Because tonight I'm a door guy, I'm not a security guard, So, anyways, that was a long one. That was a long one. We're gonna hit about 30 minutes with this one. I'd hope to be able to talk for an hour, but I do talk for an hour, but sometimes there's other people talking. So, like tomorrow, we're gonna be doing the first interview podcast, and that's gonna be a fun one because, my vision is. I'm not gonna say because I'm just gonna do it, and then you'll see, and you'll be like, "Oh, that's a cool vision." You're like, "That's the best vision I've ever seen." Woo! Just wait. Anyways, that's another edition of The True Reality. Thanks for, tuning in again. I missed yesterday because it was raining. I had other things to do yesterday. I had to go pet a little doggy, and I had to go walk on my legs, and I had to go get a little bit of a tan, and I had to go get a different shirt, and I had to go eat a little bit of spaghetti. Remember. My mind is a painting, not an essay. And each stroke of the brush, it's just another thought. God dang it!